Is MonsterVerse dying? Oh my goodness, you guys. Why is it that every time I scroll on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, even like any other social media platform, there's always like a post on like some random subreddit or subthread. It's like, guys, MonsterVerse is dead. There's only 500 players. They're dead. Whoa. Why are you preying on MonsterVerse's downfall so bad? Oh my god, there's some people who their entire profile is like dedicated to being like, MonsterVerse is gonna die. They're gonna die. And I know some people argue that for my videos, but my videos are constructive criticism, not doom posting, right? Like, there's a bit of a difference here. But regardless, I wanted to look into this because for full transparency, I have not been really involved in any Roblox games for the past couple weeks here because I had to lock in for finals. Okay, it was a hard time, but I locked in and it paid off, so I'm happy. And aside from that, it was the holidays, so much stuff. So I honestly have not been playing Roblox and have not been super up to date with games that I probably should be up to date with. So with that in mind, I decided to go ahead and take a look for myself and see if MonsterVerse was really, quote, dying as some people are claiming. And I do have some information I'd like to share with you guys. But regardless, as I'm starting this video, I'm going to go ahead and click on MonsterVerse, and as of right now, there's apparently 398 players in the game, which obviously is substantially less than in previous months. However, I do think there's a reason for this, and I will get into it in a second here, because I think some people are really just doom posting about this, which I think is making everybody stressed and anxious when that shouldn't be the case. So with that in mind, we're going to look at this post that was made by a user on Reddit because I do think they have some good points in this post that I wanted to kind of play off in the video. However, I will be blurring usernames because, again, people don't need to be getting harassed for their opinions and stuff like that. I don't think that's valid. However, this channel is a journalistic commentary channel, which means I can use comments posted publicly on a public forum with no expectation of privacy in a transformative way, and I don't need permission because people are always like, oh my god, Palm, you didn't get my permission. I don't need your permission, babe. You posted that publicly. Anyways, next. So with that in mind, we're going to be reading this Reddit thread, but just a disclaimer as to why I'm using a publicly posted thread. They write, I think the devs need to give themselves more time and or a bigger team. And this is labeled as a discussion, not a rant post. And they write, it's really clear, at least to me, they bit off more than they can chew for a team of their size, and that worries me. Not one release hasn't had huge bugs, including clothing, that wouldn't even exist had they given themselves more time. They're so passionate, I could see that. I'm a Ko-fi backer for a reason, but from how much they promised, I don't think the scope is obtainable with the way things are going. I don't mean this in a mean way, I just don't think it's realistic as someone who has experience with some game development, which, side note, this person has worded this so nicely and professionally. I have to give them kudos for that because there's a lot of people on here who are like, guys, MonsterVerse is dying and the dress didn't work. Look at this, it's so bad. It's like, what are you saying right now? Like, can you formulate this? Also, side note, when people cannot formulate their criticism in like a way that I can read it for a video, the amount of comments I've chosen to read because I think someone has something like decent to say, but they cannot formulate a coherent sentence for the life of them, or they're using like so much like abbreviations that I cannot understand what's going on here. So I really appreciate when people write in full sentences and I can like actually follow what they're saying. Aside from that, they go on to say, even with the fashion, which is clearly a priority in the release process, which makes sense in my opinion, as the game is super fashion focused, they have 4 body types they need to remodel outfits for, and they've been taking so long to fix old outfits while releasing new ones so quickly. I think if they got a few more people to help with the process, they could help keep up with all the clipping/recoloring issues body types outside of the femme skinny type have, and some options don't even appear at all. I think the game would have benefited by being delayed to next year for more detailed testing before release. Heck, even just bi-weekly updates right now, I think would be better. I understand that they want to do weekly to keep the game alive, but the amount of chaos and bugs with each one ultimately is hurting the game regardless, in my opinion. What do you guys think? I'm really curious to see how others feel. Which again, a very well-worded post. This is probably one of the most well-worded posts I've ever read on my channel, so kudos to this person. But regardless, there is something that I really want to say about this, and I have to disclose that I'm in the MonsterVerse influencer program out of transparency. I'm not going to sit here and like regurgitate stuff and not be transparent about who I am. However, I do want to clarify, I do not, benefit so far in any way, not financially, not from like any sort of like special perk in game or anything like that. This is just my honest opinion. And my honest opinion is that MonsterVerse is trying so badly to accommodate to the massive demands of the player base that it is just really difficult. And if you guys have seen anything about MonsterVerse, at least like conversations on Twitter and stuff like that, I'm not saying the MonsterVerse community, but more so just general players in the community that maybe are transitioning from other games or play other dress-up games, have been relentlessly bullying this dev team since day one. It has been insane. They've had their game banned like 4 times now. They've had like 2 attempted cancellations for stuff that was like years and years old, which doesn't mean people shouldn't be held accountable, but still, it was like, it's pretty obvious there's a certain batch of people that really wants to see this game die. And the constant negativity and doom posting about this game is just creating a bunch of in my opinion, unwarranted fear and stress among players. I even saw a thread on the MonsterVerse subreddit of some person preaching why you shouldn't buy game passes. What? And they're saying, oh, you should buy game passes because the game's gonna die and they're never gonna finish the game, which obviously, me as like a general person, I can't tell you if the game's gonna survive or not. There's no way for me to know that. Only time will tell. I don't even think that anybody in the world can know for sure if the game will be a long-term success or not. However, what I do want to say is that fear-mongering people and telling people not to buy stuff in a game where they have the autonomy and choice to purchase stuff at their own free will, I think is weird, because you're like fear-mongering people with misinformation of stuff that hasn't been substantiated yet. I think that's really unfair, and in my opinion, it comes across like you're trying to sabotage the game. But regardless, if you guys don't know, MonsterVerse has been doing so many updates, especially during the holiday season, which is another thing. I feel like people fail to recognize that the people at MonsterVerse, some of them are kids, some of them may be adults, but they're celebrating the holidays. They're probably with their families, they're visiting people. Some of them are probably in school, so they just finished doing like finals and stuff like that. And what's insane to me is that people expect these developers, the people in this dev team, to not have anything else in their life. That MonsterVerse must be their sole focus. They cannot eat, they cannot shower, you cannot sleep. You must be working on MonsterVerse, which I think is so naive to think. It's just a really, in my opinion, entitled take, because you have no idea that these people are like real functioning human beings and they have a lot of stuff on their plates. But regardless, I want to go over just some of the announcements and updates that they've made, because I've seen a lot of people using the excuse MonsterVerse is dying because there isn't updates, when in reality they have been focusing so much on updates in the past couple of weeks and doing so many bug updates that it is insane. So in the general announcement channel, they had like this happy holidays post, and then they had a whole roadmap for 2026, which is also something that I've seen a lot of people saying, oh, they have no plan for the next year. They have no plans. That's why the game's gonna die. That's why nobody's playing the game. But they post a whole plan right here, which I'll read with you guys. It says, for our ghostly 2026. Hello, ghouls. Thank you for such an amazing year. We've had some ups and downs, but we are so super grateful for everything. And before the year ends, there's some things we want to say. There's a little thank you thing. What to expect next year. The team will be focusing on fixing bugs and adding more gameplay and roleplay features alongside other events season related. We can't wait to start showcasing some sneak peeks here and there of what we've been working on, and we have some super exciting things boiling in our witches cauldron. Which, side note, I see this with, you know, not just community members in the MonsterVerse community, but also Real High community. When they don't see like update information right away, they just assume that they must not be working on anything. But in reality, in order for a game to release updates or to have new sets and stuff like that, there has to be a whole process behind the scenes with concept art, initial modeling, reviews, making sure it fits rigs, implementing it into the game, and then only at the final stage of an update are they able to share sneak peeks. And I think that's the smartest thing for any game to do, because you don't want to share something if you don't know if it'll come to full fruition yet, right? And so a lot of people are saying MonsterVerse has no updates, they're not sharing anything, when in reality based on this, what I can understand is they have been working on content, but it's not ready for any sneak peeks yet because they haven't finished testing it, which I think people will argue, oh, MonsterVerse, you're not releasing any updates, you're not releasing any content. But then when they do release content, they do release updates, they're like, oh my god, there's a bug, you should have taken more time. But then when they take more time to fix the bug, it's like, oh my god, you have no updates. So it's like this constant cycle of just hypocrisy where nothing they can do is good enough for the community, which I think must be incredibly frustrating. They also went on to explain how they fixed the tutorial, that they're going to be more active on socials, and that they're reviewing the submissions. Now, aside from that, there is a channel in the server called Update Logs, and they have been updating this really, really frequently. Example, just from like the past 2 weeks or weekish, December 19th, they had a bunch of fixes with mobs and collecting things and competition mode bugs and sizing and all this sort of stuff. And they have, the stuff that they're still planning on fixing. On the 19th, they also made more bug fixes. On the 23rd, they had more bugs fixed. On the 23rd, they had more stuff that they were working on. On the 25th, Christmas, they were still working and trying to fix bugs. These people were working on Christmas. Do you guys understand? This is so much work. And even just as of December 30th, they've been doing more fixes. Every single day, it feels like they are on here, regardless of if it's a holiday or they should be spending time with their families, fixing bugs for this game. So the whole argument that, oh, they don't have any updates and their game's dying because they have bugs, they are actually working on trying to fix these bugs. And I don't know what people expect from an initial game launch and beta, they expect it to be perfect or something. But regardless, I can empathize with players who are upset that there's bugs or things have been glitchy. But at the same time, just like you, I've paid to have assets. I've paid to play the game. When it comes to Game Passes and stuff like that, I've spent time in the game. And so there's a lot of players that are acting they've been personally victimized by the bugs, which I understand you've lost out on time, I guess. But regardless, to sit here and act like a victim because a game had a bug when everybody else is dealing with the exact same bug, I think is a little bit silly. But that's just my thoughts. Now, aside from that, I did want to go ahead and take a look at some of the comments under this post. This person reads, "You're so right to be and honestly, it's so sad seeing the player count nowadays. It can't even pass 500 sometimes," which I do acknowledge that the player count has dropped. But what's really important to know is that with any game, player counts only rise typically, like substantially, when there is a significant update. However, MonsterVerse, as per community feedback and what the community has been asking, has been focusing on bug fixes, which means they cannot prioritize massive updates at this time when they're trying to fix bugs to make sure the game is playable for everybody and enjoyable for everybody. So obviously, they're not going to release a whole brand new line of clothing when they're still trying to fix the initial clothing that they added to the game, which in my opinion is the most responsible thing that they could possibly be doing. So I can understand people being worried that the player count is low, but in my opinion, I think the player count is, quote, lower than maybe the first week it launched, mainly because the hype that was during the first week, but also they haven't released a really massive, substantial update in a couple weeks now. It's been more so bug fixes, which I think is obviously the best thing for them at this time, but I can understand maybe why there wouldn't be a super high player count. Example, even if you look at Royal High, which is a game that has been established on Roblox for several years at this point, and at one point was averaging like 300,000 players at once, they're currently averaging about 13,000 and 15,000 players at once, and they just had their Christmas event end, and they are releasing a Halo like yesterday or today, so the game has seen an influx of players. And so even then, even if you're comparing the games, like on Roblox during the Christmas time, a lot of people are away from family, they're vacationing, they're going out, they're maybe focusing on themselves, they're not sitting at their computers so much after school playing games, and so naturally, Roblox player counts will decrease a little bit during Christmas season. You can also see this with YouTube videos. If you look at my YouTube videos, when I posted them on holidays, they got significantly less views than when I post them on non-holidays, which is really interesting to me because I didn't realize that people wouldn't be watching YouTube on holidays, but I guess they're spending time with their families, which correlates directly to Roblox and Roblox player counts. So I do think the decreased player counts are a mix of not having super massive updates and also the holiday season and players being away from their computers, being out of state, maybe being on vacation, visiting family, etc. And so I think it's to be expected, and I wouldn't, coin that as being a single indicator that the game is doomed to fail or anything like that. This person says, "Yeah, it's honestly sad because it feels like it's going the same direction as Astro Renaissance." And the original poster writes, "I still mourn Astro Renaissance. I adored the game so much, it hurts to see how dead it is now. The vibes in the game were so unique." Now, I don't know a ton about Astro Renaissance, and I did try reaching out to one of the co-owners of MonsterVerse, but their DMs are off because I want to do like a little docuseries on it. But regardless, to my understanding, Astro Renaissance failed, I guess that's what you want to call it, because of some issues like internally with like the game system, which ended up making it so player data, to my recollection, like wasn't saved properly, or there's some issue with that. And the developer then applied those lessons that they learned from Astro Renaissance to MonsterVerse, and that's why they've been releasing updates slower, because they didn't want the same thing that happened to Astro Renaissance to happen to MonsterVerse. So I do feel like they're applying the same, lessons that they learned through Astro Renaissance to try and avoid it from happening in the future. So I wouldn't say that they're falling down Astro Renaissance path, more so that they're trying to avoid that because they're ultra aware of it, but that's just my take. This person says they don't have the money for it. I'm sure most of the Ko-fi money went to game. And this person responds, which is true, and hence the point, they seem to have a bit off more than they can chew for the smaller team. This person responds, they have, but from what I'm seeing in the Discord, they're opening up more like how many of their supporters said not to do weekly updates, and they listened. Which I think it's really important that a game's listening. Also, I've seen so many people say stuff about just like how much money they have, and how there was someone who accused them of mismanaging funds, which I talked about previously, which I was like, hey, you can't say that. That's like not something that's appropriate to say without evidence. Regardless, I do know, to my understanding, that MonsterVerse has obviously made money from the sale of their games, the game passes and stuff like that. I'm not sure exactly how much money that was, but considering they are doing a pretty substantial giveaway for the art contest winner, I would assume it's been a decent amount of Robux. So I wouldn't err necessarily on the side that they don't have the money for it. I would err on the side that they're trying to obviously protect the integrity of the game. And obviously, if you're in a small indie dev team, you don't want to outsource absolutely everything and then become this massive conglomeration of like Roblox developers where you're basically, you don't care about the community anymore. You're just hiring people and outsourcing stuff and constantly outsourcing. And I think part of MonsterVerse's vision, and what I understand, is that they want to keep it where it's a project that they're working on, that they're passionate about, where it's something that the team is small enough that they can listen to community feedback, and there isn't this whole like thing with different levels of almost like government within your own game, where you have to pass different levels of review, and it turns into this whole thing where it takes forever just to get one update out there. And unfortunately, that's what happens with a lot of games, especially as they become bigger. Example, Dressed and Press, or even Royal High, where they have all these levels to where they have to approve updates and stuff like that, where it takes updates significantly longer to be released because you have to, pass this through so many different channels, and there's so many people involved, and that's where miscommunication is going to occur. And so I can understand wanting to keep your development team smaller, and so I don't necessarily think that they've run out of money or they don't have the money to spend on the game, but more so they're trying to stay true to the original vision, where it is a down-to-earth, small indie development team. They don't want to make it some massive like corporation where you're just hiring random people just to get it done without like having like the purpose of your game reflected in all the work that you do. But regardless, of course, this is just my opinion. I have also, of course, noticed that MonsterVerse's player count has gone down, but as I mentioned in this video, I really don't think that it's an indicator that the game is, quote, failing. I think it's more so a reflection of the game focusing on the updates, trying to obviously appease everyone, which is impossible to a degree, and also holidays and stuff like that. The dev team have been working throughout their holiday season to try and make the game playable for you and to make the game enjoyable, and I think that's really admirable. And so for people to undermine that effort, I think is a little bit sad, but also to understand that player counts for every game on Roblox are significantly lower during the holiday season because of all the events that you're going to, vacations, visiting family, etc. So with that in mind, I think only really time will tell. I think a better indicator of how well the game is doing will be when they are like actually posting like really big updates, hopefully in the new year with some bigger features, maybe some new map locations. I definitely think we'll see a resurgence in a player base during that time. Also with them coming back to social media and posting more frequently, personally, I know from my YouTube channel, which I started just a couple months ago, posting on social media is quite literally everything. And the more you post, the more views you get, the more money you make. When I post 2 videos a day, I make double the income. That's how it works. So I think if they were posting more frequently on Twitter, maybe TikTok, YouTube, etc., I think that would also help with player count. But regardless, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye!